One day, out of the blue, a friend of mine asked me if I liked the way my vagina looked. We were meeting for drinks, and before my butt hit the bar stool, she turned to me and said, "Do you like the way your vagina looks?" It wasn't something we had talked about before. She said she didn't like hers, that it didn't look the way it was supposed to look. Now, I knew we were all different, that there was no right way to look, but I also knew that tone. Telling her would not be enough. And anyway, I hadn't actually seen any other women's vaginas, just mainstream porn magazines, and I had barely glanced at them. So really, I didn't know anything about this, and I started to get mad. I mean, how could it be that between the two of us, we had spent over 70 years in our bodies and we didn't know what vaginas looked like? So I decided right then, there should be a book. And if there wasn't one, I would shoot one. It would be called Vagina Vérité, like cinema verite, which roughly translates to truthful cinema, a style of documentary that's known for taking on provocative topics. Don't ask me how I knew that. I also knew how the images would look. They'd be square and close up and a little bit larger than life. Viewing should be easy. I stopped trying to convince her and decided I would show her. I promised. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. We passed the evening talking about other things. Now, before I go on with the story, I just want to address that some of you may be bothered by my use of the word vagina. And I don't mean that you're embarrassed, just that you think I should be saying vulva and not vagina. And you're right. When it comes to female genitalia, the vulva is the part you can see and photograph. And the canal inside, that's the vagina. But my friend had said vagina, and I wasn't using the word vulva day to day either, so it would have been weird to make that switch. I'm not a doctor or a teacher. I just wanted my friend to be able to see herself for herself. It was the summer of 2000. I bought a 2.5 megapixel camera and some lights, and I turned my bedroom into a studio. I sent out an email announcing that I was doing a book of vagina portraits and looking for models. Most of my friends thought this was a great idea. Almost no one offered to pose. And that kind of shocked me, because for me, it was kind of a math problem to solve. Women plus photos equals knowledge. Eventually, I got my first booking. As it happened, she didn't have a lot of time, but she could stop by after work. Could we do it in 15 minutes? Sure. I was ready when she arrived. I positioned the lights, moved the tripod in close, and framed her vagina through the lens as if it were any object, and not in fact the first vagina that I had ever seen. I clicked off a bunch of images without actually looking. 15 minutes later, she was out the door, and I was in front of my computer loading images. Back then, it took a little time for an image file to open, so I was waiting. And then there it was, huge on my 21-inch screen, the strangest thing I had ever seen. I shut down my computer and I backed away from it, embarrassed that I wasn't immediately empowered. But my conviction that this needed to be done was still intact. We still needed a visual reference. I didn't know what I was going to do about my reaction, so I went to bed. A few weeks later, vagina model number 2 said yes. And again, it needed to be a quick shoot. So again, I was alone for the screening, just waiting. And then it was nothing like the first one. It was totally different, completely unique. I put the first one up on the screen next to it. Seeing them there side by side like that, unabashed, beautiful, like landscape, it had a transforming effect on me. I mean, until then, an image of a vagina lived either in a pornographic or a medical context. Not that I was seeing them, but if I would see them, that's where they'd be. But on my screen, it was up to me. And that's what I wanted for my friend. for her to see herself for herself. And for that, we'd need a lot more vaginas. But women were not lining up to participate. I didn't know what to do. I mean, there really is no good way to ask a woman if you could make a portrait of her vagina. Asking made them uncomfortable. It came out like a dare. I started to wonder, how did we get here? How did it all start, this not looking and not knowing? We needed to get to the bottom of it. This time, I used snail mail, and I sent out an essay about the project and a vagina first times questionnaire. I asked women about the first time they met their vagina and what their mother first told them about their vagina. Their first conversations with their friends about their vaginas. What their mother told them about their period and what they experienced when they got it. The first time they shared their vagina with someone else. And if they had or did have a daughter, what would they want her to know about her vagina? Responses to the questionnaire came in bit by bit, and so did women offering to pose. You might be wondering about them, the women. Well, the women who made vagina portraits, they have little or nothing in common. The only requirement was that you be over 18. They ranged in age from 19 to 60. I didn't ask them about their sexual orientation, or if they had given birth, or if they had ever had sexual intercourse. I didn't survey them on the way in, or ask for their feedback on the way out. I hoped they would be comfortable. I worried about that a lot. I don't really think about much else. Most of the time, we met for the first time when they arrived at my door to make a vagina portrait. I never stopped being amazed by this. At 30 vagina portraits, I began exhibiting. I exhibited vagina vérité on its own and in group shows that explored a range of topics relating to women's bodies. How we felt about our bodies, how they were seen, spoken about, threatened, cared for, and what all that meant to our quality of life. When viewing vagina portraits, the most common response among women was, I knew we were different, but I didn't know we were that different. And then, so I guess I'm not that weird after all. One of my favorite moments was at the first exhibition. This was at a bar on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. The vagina portraits were installed on a back wall. Two of my friends stood side by side looking. I overheard one of them say, "I think that's me." And the other one said, "No, it's not." She said, "What do you mean? How do you know?" She said, "Well, that's me." After the exhibition, I couldn't bring myself to box up the vagina portraits to wait for the next time. So I installed them on my living room wall just above the couch. After a few years, the wall held 60 vagina portraits in 5 surprisingly straight rows. At one point, I managed to hang 93 vagina portraits on one wall or another. For years, my apartment was vagina central. It's not that we only talked about vaginas at my place, but it was nice that you could. By 2011, I had made over 100 vagina portraits. Sometimes, before or after a shoot, we would talk for hours. Always, I couldn't believe that I got to do this. That I got to talk with women about things we never get to talk about. Things you can't tell by looking. Things they didn't know that other women also thought about or went through. What did I learn? Well, I doubt many of us could pick our vagina out of a photo lineup or know that what we're looking at is a vulva. We didn't finish discussing how it is that we got here, this not looking and not knowing about our bodies. We each have our reasons why. Turned out this wasn't a math problem to solve. In 2018, I started exhibiting again. In a studio downtown, I installed the vagina portraits on 3 walls, and on the 4th wall, women posted their thoughts. They wrote about what they did and didn't know about their vaginas and their bodies. They wrote about what they had been told while growing up and what they wished they had known. But mostly, they wrote about what it meant to them to see ourselves for ourselves. There really is a lot we should talk about. Thank you.